Hi everyone, what's up? Josh here, taking a real good look at 64mm grinder burrs. And I am fortunate enough to have been loaned 7 identical DF64 grinders to pursue this fascination that comes with how a set of grinder burrs can completely change the way coffee brews and tastes. Now, to introduce the burrs that we will be testing today, there are 3 sets of Itamil burrs. These are your stock standard stainless steel set, a titanium coated set that comes standard now on the DF64, and then a DLC set, aka diamond light coating burrs. Following this, we have burrs from the well-known SSP burr manufacturer with the Red Speed High Uniformity Espresso burr set, the MP or multi-purpose burr set, and then the most recent addition of the cast steel burr with DLC coating, resembling that of the Ditting 80mm Lab Suite burrs. And then finally, a 64mm set of Gorilla Gear burrs. In approaching this video, I'm not here to point out which burr set will be the best overall. And the reason for that is quite simple. We don't all enjoy coffee the same way. To the very smallest of details, this is going to be my anecdotal discovery on how the different burrs make coffee taste to me. And for you, I'm going to be doing this as a blind tasting and then arranging the cups in an order, discussing what I'm tasting, and then reveal which cup is which burr set. And then doing this over 3 different flights. So a filter set, an espresso set, as well as a milk tasting. So I'll be adding steamed milk to the espresso. Now, these 64mm burrs are popular upgrades to home grinders that include the fellow Ode Brew grinder, the DF64 I'm using today, the Matza Super Jolly and Matza Mini, as well as an option Ode P64, the Firenzato All Ground, as well as the Anthem Caimano. I do want to point out that some burr sets do have issues fitting into the fellow Ode Brew grinder, depending on which version of the fellow Ode that you have. So it is best to be aware of that before you purchase burrs and put them in that grinder. And before we begin tasting today, let's get a better understanding of each individual burr set that we're using. And if you stick with me, well, you might as well then go ahead and smash that like button and hit the subscribe, as it helps our channel grow, and we certainly plan to make more videos just like this. So let's now get into it. With varying degrees of complexity, I'm going to try and break down the main differences in these burrs now. First, taking a look at the treatment or the coating that has been applied to the burrs during the manufacturing process. Now, this will increase the longevity of the burr set, though there really are 2 ways to look at this. You're either just ever increasing the overall longevity of a burr set, which in a home setting is kind of crazy as they already last a really long time, like 10, 15, or even 20 years. In a commercial setting, different story. The volumes that they go through absolutely warrant having a longer lasting burr set, but in the short term, what a better coating and finish does to a burr set is A, protect the cutting edge of the burr, so it wears much slower, and then you're gonna have a grinder that has a more significant lifespan at its peak performance. And in most cases, the burr set is gonna outlast any motor on a home grinder. And B, it lowers the coefficient of friction. In other words, how easy does the surface of the burr slide forwards and back and up against other metal surfaces? Now, with friction comes heat. So with a lower coefficient, there's less heat production in grinding and less transfer of heat to the grounds. And the grinding performance is further boosted as it is believed to reduce the retention of those grounds that get caught up on the surface and the teeth of the burrs. Though, with any particular coating, it's not fully understood whether it assists in how the beans are actually ground up, as this relies more on the design and the geometry of the burrs. When online, the geometry of a burr set is not something that we have direct ability to inspect. However, the geometry of a burr set does create a grind size distribution pattern, and then descriptions like high uniformity, unimodal, and bimodal, these all refer to what style of grind size distribution pattern the burrs create. You'll either have 2 peaks of grind sizes within a dose, one being the majority of that ground dose and the other being a smaller sample made up of fines in the dose. This is known as bimodal. And you can almost see how they achieve this in the design of the burrs, where there are 2 significant areas on the inner and the outer edges of the burr. Starting on the inside diameter of the burr set, you'll find pre-breakers of varying amounts and degrees of incline. And this is where the beans first get broken into smaller particles before moving outwards towards the teeth of a burr set, where the final grind setting is dictated. Higher uniformity burrs are a sidestep from bimodal burrs, where they are slightly more leaning towards a unimodal distribution, though still having a portion of fines present within the dose. And on the SSP high uniformity burr set, they have this nuanced nick in the pre-breaker and quite a large open set of teeth leading up to the outer edge of the burrs. Gorilla burrs, they have a similar geometry, though they don't have that nick, yet still have quite large open sets leading up to the teeth. And then a unimodal burr set grinds out a very consistent singular grind size, where you have very little in the way of fines or other grind sizes present within the dose. And you can see how they achieve this in the SSP multi-purpose burr set that has no pre-breakers. So it leads straight into the burr teeth across the full surface of the burrs. And factors of grind distribution, well, they're made up predominantly from the geometry of the burrs, however also from the RPMs of the motors as well. And whilst we don't all have RPM variable grinders available to us, it is important to note that low RPMs can play a factor in reducing the temperature creation, as well as elevating the grind distribution towards a higher uniformity as well. All right, now there are a few more honorable mentions in regards to making these tests happen before we get started. And that is making sure that each one of these flat burr sets is aligned correctly. And on 7 grinders, I'm sure that's no quick and easy task. So a big shout out to Frank for doing that for me, thank you. There's also ensuring that there are similar grind sizes across the setting for filter cupping that we're about to get into. And of course, dialing in for an espresso, something like the SSP MP burr set, for espresso at least, presents a very different experience and approach to dialing in espresso specifically than, say, the regular stainless steel burr set does. And I think that's really important to acknowledge here. Some of these burrs I've discovered require different approaches to brew good espresso than just taking a standard burr set and then following a standard way of making a standard espresso, expecting that removing that burr set and placing a higher quality burr set and not adjusting anything else in that recipe will increase the standards of the coffee produced. It's not actually always the case. And we can talk more about that when we get to the espresso flight. Let's now just clear the bench and begin the filter grind blind cupping and talk out those results. 7 cups of coffee. This is fantastic. Now, just to let you guys know, I'm using a Kenyan coffee. It has tasting notes of peach, white grape, and manuka honey. So a good amount of acidity, brightness, and sweetness, but also balanced with a little bit of that body from manuka honey flavors. I've arranged the cups in front of me in order of intensity. So on the left of me here, this cup isn't very intense. It has some brightness, some acidity, some sweetness in it, but it just doesn't carry through. It's not intense all the way through the cup. It has, I guess it's a weak cup of coffee in terms of its intensity, in terms of the strength of it. Not a lot of body, so there's no lingering aftertastes on this end. And then the flavors and the intensity of the sweetness in the body and all of that just gets more intense as we go along. So you kind of get to this middle cup and go, well, there's a good balance of brightness, sweetness, acidity, and there's a good balance of body, because at this end, what ends up happening is the intensity becomes so great in the body that it takes away from the acidity, the brightness, and the sweetness. So at this end, I find that it's a strong cup of coffee, though the characteristics of the coffee are somewhat hidden underneath just the intensity of the cup of coffee itself. It's not very bright, it's not very juicy, and it has more body to it with a lingering aftertaste, which could be enjoyable for some. This could be enjoyable for others. So I've kind of like, rather than splitting it off towards sweet, like the most sweetness or the most brightness or whatever, I've just kind of gone with an intensity of the cups, what jumps out at me, what lingers, what falls off of the tongue really quickly and keeps it nice and clean. And we'll go that way. Now, we'll reveal which cups are which soon. I will just explain further. I guess I'll just do a quick one more cupping just to explain what I'm getting in each cup. And then I'll let you know that out of the 7 cups, they were 1 to 7 introduced similar to I introduced the Burrs at the beginning. So the first 3, 1, 2, 3 are the ITMIL Burrs, Titanium and DLC, followed up by the SSP Burrs, High Uniformity, Multi-Purpose, and the Cast Steel Burrs. And then number 7 is the Gorilla Gear Burrs. Woo! Coffee's kicking in. So yeah, a lot of brightness up front, nice acidity on this cup, but kind of dry on the finish even on this first cup of coffee. Kind of dry, not much in the middle. Definitely a lot more sweetness in the second cup, and that sweetness kind of lingers through to into the middle of the cup and offers a little bit of lingering aftertaste on the tongue as well. So it's a little bit more intense with its sweetness and some more body in it as well. Certainly a lot more acidity and sweetness, really well balanced up front. There's some body growing really quickly straight after that, and then that carries all of that over to the aftertaste. So third cup is just getting more intense, more heavy from the start to the end of the cup, as opposed to these first 2 cups, which are quite a lot of flavor up front, nothing at the back end. This middle cup out of the 7, I kind of like that I can almost split it even with 1 in the middle, but this cup has everything up front. So the sweetness and the acidity isn't muddled in the body, but the body is there up front. Whereas these are just straight up sweetness and acidity. This one is sweetness and acidity, but the body comes on real quickly. This one has everything on the palate right up front. I guess I would explain this one to be like the previous cup, but just everything is just a little bit more intense. Definitely a lot more acidity in this cup. Probably not a very enjoyable acidity. And it's kind of like, it's all mainly body in this cup, quite a dry cup, but it has a bright acidity to it. So it's kind of like contrasted. There's some acidity in there, but it's mostly just kind of body as well. It's really nice though, as these cups cool down, that white grape is really coming out in the cups. Again, kind of dull and muted in terms of characteristics. There's kind of like a little bit of Manuka honey coming through here, but it's quite a, it doesn't have anything near the acidity or sweetness of these, I would say first 4 cups. The intensity of it though is all in its body, kind of overpowering any of the acidity or sweetness. A lot of the body, a lot of that strength in this cup of coffee, I'm finding is kind of muting out any discernible flavors. There's not a lot of transparency in the flavor. Not muddled, but it's just like a strong cup of coffee that's without too much clarity. Let's just get into the nitty gritty and find out which grinder is which. All right, number 3. So number 3 was the ITMIL Burrs. It was the DLC light coating. Number 1, so that was the ITMIL Burrs stainless steel. Whoa, how's that? Number 2 is the titanium. So we've got 1, 2, 3 on the right here, and that is all the ITMIL Burrs. Interesting. All right, let's see where they land up on these 4. Yep, number 6, which was the cast steel Burrs. That's pretty well smack bang in the middle. That's really cool. So that's the one that was, I would say, the most balanced. It has a lot of sweetness and acidity, but it has enough body right up front to really present the whole cup, flavor notes and all. That's awesome. Number 4. Number 4 is the SSP High Uniformity Red Speed Burrs. Number 5, which is the SSP Multi-Purpose Burr set. So leaning towards the unimodal grind distribution. And then obviously Gorilla Gear. Number 7, Gorilla Gear. Wow, that's really cool. We'll go back over that again. We've got all 3 ITMIL Burrs up here with a lot of complexity, but not much cleanliness or transparency in the flavors. We have the cast steel SSP burrs, which sit in the middle with some balance of both cleanliness, clarity, sweetness, brightness, but with body up front and throughout. And then following that, going to less intense and more clean, fast finishes. We have the high uniformity SSP burrs, the multi-purpose SSP burrs, and then the Gorilla Gear DLC like coating burrs. Very cool. Very cool indeed. All right, let's do some magic. I'll clean this up and we'll come back and do an espresso tasting. Woo! All right, 7 espressos, tasting them back to back. This is wild. I think I've almost bitten off more than I can taste with 7 espressos. I've done 4, I've done 5. Tasting 7 back to back has been a really big challenge. Now, this is my second flight. I feel like I've been more successful in this flight. I redid the flights because the challenges that presented themselves in dialing in 7 espressos, brewing them back to back, and then tasting them, trying to keep my palate as clean as possible. So dialing in the espressos was interesting enough, making sure that I got each of the grinders dialed into the recipe that I was after. Now, luckily I have 7 grinders to choose from, and I'm aware how the burrs heating up during dialing in will change the way you dial in. And I'll explain that a little bit when you have to change the grind setting and then go back and make a second espresso back to back on the one grinder, the burrs warm up. And in doing so, the temperature profile on the grinder changes as it heats up, and that will change the way the burrs react and the way you dial in your coffee. So I was aware that if I didn't get the right grind setting, I would make that adjustment and then move on to another grinder and then kind of come back at a later stage, because I knew whilst dialing in 7 espressos across 7 different grinders, basically each grinder was going to be cold from the moment I started using it. So I wanted to try and maintain the most consistency as possible when it came into using that grinder. Otherwise, you definitely would be chasing your tail if you were just dialing in one grinder until it heated up and then dialing in the other grinder until it heated up. You'd come back to that first grinder and the grind setting you thought was the grind setting best for your recipe, just not the case. Anyway, that's that long-winded story. Now I'm using a 15-gram basket. I was brewing out 30 grams, but it was really difficult to get each grinder brewing to 30 grams within the time frame that I wanted. So I extended it up to 40 grams and brewed to 20 seconds. So it's more like a turbo shot. And that actually really got me thinking, if you're going to be drinking espressos and you're interested in buying different burr sets, then I'm imagining you want to get, I guess, the most clarity and the most transparency and flavor notes out of your coffees. That's probably what you're chasing. Now, if you weren't chasing that, if you were just chasing typical espresso and that was full-bodied, rich, heavy, crema full, not using light roasted coffee or anything, I don't know if you would be chasing a different burr set. But if I'm wrong, add that in the comment section down below, and I will fully accept that I was assuming otherwise. Anyway, I've lined them up into intensities just like I did with the filters. This was a challenge. This was very much a challenge, but I've broken it down. At the end here, it's the most brightest. At the back here, it's the most heaviest and juiciest. So it has a lot of strength in it, a lot of flavor. And this has the most cleanliness and the most transparency, the most room between flavors as well. More fidelity, less fidelity. So this is more clean, more like you can taste the flavors separately and to themselves, whereas this is definitely more muddled and more complex, I guess. Yeah, that's how I would explain it. Let's just check these grinders out. I'm really keen to know. All right, we'll start this end first. Drum roll. All right. Wow. Okay. Number 4. So that's the SSP Red Speed burrs. Interesting. SSP Red Speed. Number 1, which is your regular in-mill stainless steel burrs.
We've got the Gorilla Gear Burrs. Interesting. In the middle is the SSP cast steel Burrs. Nice. So that was like the same as the filter one before. It was the middle one. It was balanced. It had everything. We've got 5, which was the SSP multi-purpose burr set for espresso. 2, which was the titanium burrs. And then these would be the DLC. Wow, okay. So titanium DLC, regular Idemil stainless steel burrs. Really clean, bright, juicy. We've got the multi-purpose burr set that's sitting up there, kind of in the middle with the Gorilla Gear burrs and the cast steel SSP burrs. And then down the end here, we've got the stainless steel Idemil and the SSP high uniformity red speed burrs. This for me, the SSP high uniformity red speed burrs, you imagine they're going to be high clarity when it says high uniformity. That's kind of like where you take it, but in fact, for most of the tastes that I've done on these burrs, they've always been the heavy body. They've always been down this further end of the balance of high clarity, high sweetness and brightness, but still with a lot of body in them. So I'm kind of almost convinced that that's its profile. Really cool to see the cast steel burrs in the middle again, kind of balancing up sweetness as well as body. Interesting to see these 2 Idemil burrs down the end here, especially with the recipe, because I wanted to approach this trying to get the best out of all the burrs, imagining honestly that the red speeds would probably shine through, as longer ratios tend to work better for higher uniformity burrs as opposed to straight standard burr sets. But that's where we're at. Idemils, cast steel, red speed, and then Gorilla Gear and multi-purpose in the middle. That was really interesting and equally delicious across all of them. Good coffee, good burrs. What's next? Let's add milk. Wow. All right. 7 piccolos, 7 macchiatos, 7, the recipe is 18 grams in, 20 grams out in just as many seconds. So more like a double ristretto. And then I've added 40 mils of milk. So 20 grams of espresso, 40 double milk. Same jug. Not a lot of foam in any of the cups, so it's just hot milk. So equal amounts of hot milk in each cup. I've given them a stir. Now, that first round of tasting, I noticed on the front of the palate, like there's different flavors, like a little bit of like bright acidity, kind of bitiness, doesn't really go equally well with the coffee. So I was like, oh, I don't like that. And then there are others where I sipped and it was just quite, I wouldn't say chocolatey. So it's the same coffee that I used for the espresso. Not chocolatey, but it was just a little bit creamier, a little bit smoother in terms of the notes of the coffee went along with the milk really well. Yeah, really like brightness to it that just doesn't linger nicely through the middle of the milk. Similar there, but there's some sweetness in it. So there's some sweetness in this cup. There's no sweetness in this cup. A little bit more body, a little bit more texture to the flavors, a little bit more complexity that adds to the enjoyable nature of the cup through the milk. Yeah, like this first cup kind of like has this coffee as the hero, and it's really kind of not doing the milk any justice, like that creaminess in the cup. These next cups have a lot of sweetness, so they're kind of slowly attaching themselves to the milk. This is the most creaminess so far of all of these, and it's kind of like one cup. These are all very espresso forward, and then the milk kind of like comes in, whereas this is kind of like the one flavor married together. Strong, not a lot of sweetness in these. I would say, again, this is kind of like the middle ground. This has all the sweetness, all the body, has everything. It's nice and balanced. Down the end here, unbalanced, more biased towards the acidity, sweetness, more biased towards the coffee. And down here is just a lot of complexity and not a lot of nuanced flavors. Let's see what burr sets we've got. So that was number 3. That is the Innermill Burrs DLC. Number 4, Red Speed Burrs, the high uniformity Red Speed Burrs. Again, up against this high end of a lot of complexity, a lot of body in it. We got 2. We've got the 2, which was the, help me out here, titanium burrs. The Innermill titanium burrs. Oh, there we go again with the cast steel burrs from SSP. So Innermill DLC, high uniformity SSP, titanium Innermill burrs, and then the cast steel SSP in the middle once more. That's just been the consistent cup each time. We've got the MP Red Speed Burrs, multi-purpose. We've got the Gorilla Gear Burrs and Innermill Burrs. The Innermill Burrs in the stainless steel set, which is interesting nonetheless. It's kind of like there are some similarities here to how I tasted the espressos. Definitely the number one consistency in all of this is that the cast steel from SSP. Interesting, really cool set of burrs. We've got the Red Speed high uniformity burrs, which again, consistently is kind of at this further end of the spectrum, heavy body, richness to it. Innermill burrs kind of flipped. In the espressos, these two were down this end and this one was up here, and then with milk they flipped, which was interesting. You'd think consistency in the espressos, but I changed the recipe. So Gorilla Gear Burrs, I think they were down here before. Yeah, interesting. Now, searching for words for the summary of all of these burr sets. I think if it was me, I'd look at what I'm doing right now. If I was shopping for a new burr set, it really depends on whether I'm brewing filter or espresso, and definitely there are burr sets here that will do both. The cast steel burr has shown that specifically. It's quite balanced in the middle for both espresso and filter. But I think if I was doing filter coffee, you're generally drinking it black, so there's really only one road to go down, and that is getting a better burr set that will provide higher uniformity and more clarity and transparency in the cup. So there are those burr sets here. But for espresso, you've got 2 different roads you can walk down. There is one road which might possibly radically change the way you make espresso right now. If you get a burr set and you're really chasing to improve flavor clarity, then you might need to look at the way you're making the espresso with the recipes, with the water, and so on and so forth, along with the burr set that you purchase. As mentioned before, you're just taking a stock standard recipe, beans and so forth, I'm losing my voice, excuse me, and taking another burr set and thinking it will just change the way the coffee tastes, you might end up having to change the way you make coffee as well to get the best results. So there's that road, or there is the road which I look upon, which is like, you've got a stock standard burr set, but if you pick up a set that has different coating, it does make an improvement. Higher uniformity, better tasting coffee without having to rapidly change the way you brew coffee. So you're either looking at the coating, which will improve your current way of making a standard coffee, or you're looking at the geometry of the burrs, which most likely will radically change the way you brew coffee. That's the best way I can summarize it. That's the best way I can summarize it for sure. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I've drunk so much coffee right now. I'm so buzzing. Thank you for watching to the end of it. If you have any comments, add them in the comment section down below and we'll get straight back to you, and we'll see you in the next video.